Okay, so today is December the 12th, 2024. This is going to be the last video of the day. You know, I thought about this video right here. This video right here is on, where are we at here? Black Culture Diary. And the title to the video is Late Mugabe warned Africa of Trump being a biblical Goliath, right? Now, this will be my second time watching this video. And what I suggest is that when you hear the name Donald Trump, let it go in one ear and out the other. And the reason why I say that is because Donald Trump is just a figurehead. There are surreptitious forces behind him, and he pushes their agenda. So, you know, I don't particularly know where, you know, the Black Culture Diary is coming from. You know, again, they're using an AI voice. I think it's an AI voice. But it's a lot of good information on that channel. And again, the channel is Black Culture Diary. It has 321,000 followers. And this particular video right here was dropped 7 days ago, and it has 14,000 views. But again, you know, I don't want my audience to get caught up and focus on the name Donald Trump. Just listen to the information, but every time you hear the name Donald Trump, and I'm not for or against Donald Trump, you know, I have no stake in that game right there, right? But every time you hear the name Donald Trump, think of ruling class, American ruling class. So let's get to it. This is a 20-minute video, and I know sometimes I ramble, so I'm gonna try to, as much as possible, keep my mouth shut.
What if the world's biggest bully is a fragile giant waiting to be toppled? Does that sound absurd? Well, it should, because it's exactly what Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe's long-reigning former president, was trying to tell us. When he compared Donald Trump to the biblical Goliath, it wasn't just some passing remark. Mugabe was warning us about a global Goliath who used his power to bully and manipulate countries into submission. And guess what? He wasn't wrong. While Trump tries to play the role of the unstoppable force, the truth is, he's vulnerable, and Mugabe knew it. And he asked a simple question: are we going to let Goliath keep bullying us, or is it time for the world to stand up like David? But are his remarks about Trump justified? Did he know something? We don't. Let's find out.
And the reason why I'm playing this particular video here is because all those so-called black conservatives, all these people who jumped off the Democratic bandwagon and jumped over to the Republican Party, this is for you. This is very important information right here. This is why I say you have to be aware of international foreign policy. You know, this internal stuff is nothing. The external stuff will destroy you.
At first glance, comparing Donald Trump to the biblical Goliath might sound like an absurd exaggeration. Goliath was this towering giant in the Old Testament, feared for his massive size and strength, while Trump is just one man. But here's the thing: Trump's power, especially as the leader of the most influential country in the world, isn't just physical. It's financial, political, and military. And just like Goliath used his immense stature to intimidate and control, Trump used his nation's vast resources and power to manipulate weaker countries, demanding that they bend to his will or suffer the consequences. Mugabe wasn't just making a passing comparison when he called Trump Goliath. He was making an observation about global power dynamics. When you examine Trump's leadership and his approach to foreign policy, it becomes glaringly evident that his presidency resembled Goliath's characteristics: an overwhelming, domineering force that crushes those who dare to resist. Mugabe saw this dynamic play out in the real world, not just as a theoretical statement. Trump's approach to foreign policy wasn't rooted in diplomacy or cooperation. It was about showing raw power, using the leverage of the United States military, economic, and political might to push smaller countries around.
Ruling class.
This became particularly clear in his withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Think about it. Here was a global accord designed to unite nearly every country on Earth in the fight against climate change. But Trump, with a wave of his hand, erased years of diplomatic work because it didn't fit his America First agenda. He didn't just ignore the work done by smaller nations. He actively put their futures at risk by allowing the U.S. to abdicate its role in a global problem that affects everyone. That's Goliath-style behavior, bullying the rest of the world into accepting his terms, no matter how dangerous or irresponsible. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Trump's actions consistently pointed to a leader who used his nation's power to impose his will on others. Whether it was the reckless trade war with China or his unpredictable behavior with NATO, his leadership style mirrored the Goliath figure who takes no prisoners. The trade war, for instance, wasn't just a dispute between the US and China. It had a ripple effect that hurt countries worldwide. Smaller economies, particularly those in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, found themselves caught in the crossfire of this larger conflict. The tariffs imposed by Trump were a direct attack on the global economic system, and smaller nations, who relied on the stability of international trade, saw their economies destabilized. These were nations that had nothing to do with the core dispute between the US and China, yet Trump's unilateral actions left them vulnerable to economic damage. It is the same tactic Goliath used in the Bible: intimidate and crush others underfoot, without regard for their well-being or survival. Trump's bullying didn't stop at trade and environmental issues. His administration's assault on multilateralism was perhaps the clearest signal of his Goliath-like behavior. The U.S. pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP), an agreement that would have been a major economic boon for many countries, especially those in Asia. The TPP was designed to foster economic cooperation between nations, strengthening their ties against growing threats from China and other emerging markets. But Trump saw it as a deal that didn't benefit him directly, so he pulled out, throwing away a crucial international economic initiative. That's not just arrogance. It's the behavior of someone who thinks they can do whatever they want without consequence. Goliath wasn't interested in negotiation or fair play. He wanted to win by crushing everyone in his path. Even more telling was Trump's decision to abandon international institutions and agreements that were designed to keep the world safe and stable. The U.S. exit from the United Nations Human Rights Council was a prime example. The Council's job is to promote and protect human rights globally, but Trump's administration made it clear they didn't care about global human rights concerns. The U.S. decision to step away was a blow to global cooperation, particularly for nations that rely on international oversight to hold more powerful nations accountable. Similarly, by leaving the Iran nuclear deal, Trump not only damaged a crucial international agreement, but also put global security at risk, destabilizing a region that has long been volatile. These aren't just policy choices. They are clear signals that Trump wasn't interested in global cooperation. He was more focused on projecting strength, using the USES position of power to dominate and dictate the rules. Just like Goliath, Trump was more about using fear, force, and manipulation to keep others in check. But here's the thing: Goliath's power wasn't absolute. And Mugabe, a leader who himself stood up to global bullies, understood the process of how giants eventually fall. The comparison was no accident. It was a calculated warning. Mugabe had seen history unfold when the seemingly unbeatable were overthrown. He knew that no matter how intimidating a Goliath may seem, there's always a David waiting to challenge them. History has shown us that power, when abused, often leads to its own downfall. Trump, with all his bravado, was no different. His bullying, while effective in the short term, was setting the stage for a global backlash. Mugabe's comparison to Goliath wasn't just a random jab at Trump's personality. It was a deeper insight into how global power dynamics work. He understood that Goliaths, no matter how big they seem, eventually create enough resentment and opposition to spark their downfall. It's not
That's what's happening with America right now. The entire world is turning against America.
Always immediate. It's a slow unraveling that starts when smaller nations refuse to bow down any longer. But here's the key takeaway: Goliath doesn't fall overnight. It's a gradual process. His power starts to fade when his bullying tactics begin to lose their effectiveness. When countries see that they don't have to cower in fear, when they stand together and refuse to let one nation dictate the terms, that's when the giant begins to lose its grip. Mugabe knew this well. His resistance to Western powers, especially through the land reform policies in Zimbabwe, was a symbolic challenge to the broader forces of global dominance. But Mugabe also knew that resistance requires unity. The fight against Goliath's power isn't a solo battle. It's about coming together to create a force strong enough to take down the giant.
Some of us were embarrassed, if not frightened, but what appeared to be the return of the biblical giant called Goliath. Are we having a return of Goliath to our midst, who threatens the extinction of other countries? And may I say to the United States President, Mr. Trump, please blow your trumpet. Blow your trumpet in a musical way towards the values of unity, peace, cooperation, togetherness.
Tubi, free move.
Togetherness, dialogue, which we have always stood for, and which are well written in our very sacred document, the Charter of the United Nations.
But what did Mugabe say about the solution? How do we challenge a Goliath like Trump? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Mugabe asked a question. He said, "Ever wondered what would happen if we stopped letting superpowers pull the strings? If countries stopped bickering over petty differences and stood together, maybe, just maybe, Goliath wouldn't have such a tight grip on the world." It's an intriguing thought, isn't it? Imagine a world where the smaller nations, often overshadowed by giants like the US, decided enough was enough and started pushing back, together. That's exactly what Mugabe envisioned. He didn't just talk about unity as a lofty ideal. He lived it, fought for it, and saw it as the only way to take down giants like Trump, who wield their power in a way that's often detrimental to global stability. Mugabe's fight wasn't just for Zimbabwe, it was for Africa. The continent had always been subjected to foreign domination, first by colonial powers, then by post-colonial interference, and now by modern-day economic and political giants like the US. Mugabe was aware that if Africa remained fractured, divided by internal conflicts, political challenges, and historical wounds, it would never be able to stand up to these global bullies. His vision was clear. Unity among African nations is the key to surviving and thriving in a world that often seeks to control them. Let's take a step back and examine history. Africa has faced countless external threats, and for much of the 19th and 20th centuries, it was divided, exploited, and subjected to colonial rule. Even after independence, the colonial powers didn't completely loosen their grip. Many African countries faced neo-colonial exploitation, where foreign governments and multinational corporations controlled the continent's resources and economies. These forces didn't just target countries individually, they played nations against each other, often exploiting existing divisions. This created a fragmented Africa, vulnerable to outside interference. Mugabe recognized this historical pattern and understood that to truly combat the giants, whether in the form of colonizers, imperial powers, or modern economic superpowers like the US, Africa needed to unite. His entire political career was built on this vision of a united Africa standing firm against external pressures. The fight for Zimbabwe's independence was part of a larger struggle that Mugabe saw as a collective mission for all African nations. Resist domination, reclaim resources, and chart their own course in the world. It wasn't about diplomacy for diplomacy's sake. It was about building a shared vision and collective action among African nations to ensure that they wouldn't remain pawns in someone else's game. Mugabe's thinking wasn't just idealistic, it was deeply pragmatic. He knew that when nations stand alone, they're vulnerable to manipulation. Take Trump's America First policies, for example. Under this doctrine, Trump's government focused on pulling the US out of international agreements, ignoring global cooperation, and pushing national self-interest at the expense of everyone else. When the US walked away from international deals, be it the Paris Climate Agreement or trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, countries that were part of these agreements were left scrambling to pick up the pieces. And it wasn't just the big powers like China or Europe feeling the heat. Smaller nations, particularly those in Africa, found themselves isolated, struggling to secure their interests without the support of global networks. Mugabe saw the fragility in this dynamic. By not working together, smaller nations were left vulnerable to the whims of the world's Goliaths. If Africa stayed divided, if its nations couldn't come together, it would remain at the mercy of these external forces. In contrast, Mugabe envisioned a united Africa, a continent that would leverage its collective power to shape its destiny. This wasn't just about defense against foreign domination. It was about putting Africa in a position of strength where its countries could negotiate from a place of unity rather than isolation. He believed that a united Africa could be a force to be reckoned with in the global arena, one that wouldn't bow to the dictates of Trump or any other global bully. But here's the reality. Unity sounds nice in theory, but how realistic is it when every nation has its interest to protect? Africa is not a monolith. It's a continent with over 50 countries, each with its own unique challenges, priorities, and political landscapes. Many African nations face internal divisions, ethnic, political, and economic, that often make it difficult to find common ground. Furthermore, poverty, corruption, and political instability complicate the path toward unity. Mugabe's vision for Africa's united front wasn't naive. It was grounded in the recognition that the continent's greatest strength lay in its ability to overcome these divisions and come together as one. But the path to true unity was never going to be easy. Mugabe himself faced resistance from within the continent and from external forces that were invested in keeping Africa fragmented. In the end, his struggle to unite Zimbabwe against Western pressures was part of a broader, more complex effort to unite the continent as a whole. And that effort continues today, with the African Union AU playing a central role in attempting to create greater economic and political cohesion. Yet, even today, Africa remains divided. While there have been successes, such as the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, which aims to boost intra-African trade, the reality is that the continent still faces many challenges in fully realizing Mugabe's vision of unity. Countries often act in their self-interest, and regional disputes continue to arise. The hope for Africa to unite into a singular powerful bloc capable of resisting global giants is far from being realized. But the dream is alive, and Mugabe, despite his flaws, was pushing the continent in that direction, warning that only through unity could Africa hope to challenge the Goliaths of the world. So, can Africa truly unite and stand up to the Goliaths of the world? Will Trump let it happen? Let's not mince words. Trump's entire presidency has been one giant wrecking ball to global cooperation. His approach has been about isolation, not cooperation. By turning his back on treaties, leaving the United Nations Human Rights Council, and pulling the US out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Trump didn't just make enemies. He created a chaotic environment where working together felt almost impossible. He didn't just withdraw from agreements. He actively sowed division and dismantled established frameworks that had kept the world more or less aligned for decades. Trump's America First ideology has been the centerpiece of his foreign policy. He took the US out of multilateral negotiations, ignoring the interconnectedness of global economies, ecosystems, and security. This isolationist mindset wasn't just about protecting American interests. It was about reshaping the world in a way that left smaller nations to fend for themselves, without the protection or support of the US or international frameworks. Countries that had come to rely on global cooperation found themselves scrambling, trying to figure out how to move forward when the world's largest power decided it was no longer interested in collaboration. But here's the silver lining. We're seeing the cracks. Trump's bullying tactics are exposing the weaknesses in the global order, revealing just how fragile the so-called alliances and institutions are when one nation pulls out of the equation. The global order, built on cooperation, consensus, and partnership, suddenly looks much more brittle. With these cracks forming, it could very well be the perfect time for Africa to step up and take its place on the world stage, not just as a passive participant, but as an active, empowered player.
And that's exactly what's happening. With the emergence of BRICS, Africa is definitely breaking away from that neo-colonial mentality for sure.
Africa has long been sidelined in global discussions, often considered a place for the extraction of resources rather than a continent with its voice and vision. However, the erosion of international agreements and the destabilization of long-standing alliances create an opening. If Africa can unite and forge its path, it could fill the vacuum left by a fractured global order. But the question remains, will the world let it? Can Africa break free from the constraints imposed by external forces, or will it continue to be pushed into the background by larger, more powerful nations? The stakes have never been higher. If Africa can truly unite, not just politically, but economically and socially, it has the potential to be a powerful force in shaping global discourse. This opportunity hinges on whether African nations can overcome the challenges of internal divisions, historical exploitation, and economic disparities. And even if they can, will the global Goliaths, Trump included, allow it? The answer to this question could determine the future of not just Africa, but the entire global balance of power. The world may be fractured, but that may be the very moment Africa needs to rise. Will the world listen to Mugabe's warning, or will Trump's power continue to lead us into chaos? Mugabe's message serves as a stark reminder. Unchecked power is dangerous, and no one, no matter how big they seem, is invincible forever. His comparison of Trump to Goliath isn't just a metaphor. It's a warning about the dangerous path we're on. But Mugabe's call to unity still rings true, and Africa, with all its strength and resilience, could be the one to show the world that unity can take down even the most formidable giants. So, will Africa rise, or will the world continue to let Goliath run the show? Let us know in the comments section. Will Trump's oppression be stopped by African unity? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Now again, this that was a good video right there. I wish the people who constructed the video wouldn't have concentrated so much on Donald Trump, because it's way bigger than Donald Trump. Again, Donald Trump is just a figurehead. I mean, you have some very, very powerful ruling classes and self-interest groups that are behind the scenes. Yeah, so this is a Black Culture Diary. Go over there and check it out. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk to the brothers, particularly the brothers who have found themselves on the other side of the fence, behind the prison walls. We need to have a conversation. We need to have a conversation. So I'm going to end this video right now. It's already ran for almost, 24 minutes and 2 seconds. We're at 24 minutes, and I don't want to ramble on, but I'll be back mañana. Peace.